So, the Game Awards. Legendary Drops made a video which I have already seen halfway through, and he uploaded this video 2 weeks ago, so I kind of procrastinated on the topic a tiny little bit, but I thought, hey, in a week it is time for the next Game Awards to happen. He made a video about it. I disagree with a lot of his statements, and I thought it might be worth it to go over them. As you can see, I've already prepared a few things, and yeah, I would say let's just jump right into it.
People are losing their minds over the Game Awards. I mean, I feel like this sort of thing happens just about every single year. I mean, it's everybody's favorite hobby, right? You have your favorite games, and when they don't get nominated or recognized, you start to ask some questions. And to be honest with you, over the last couple of years, the way that things have been going, I think people are asking questions for all the right reasons. I want to say this first. I am so happy that I was wrong in my assumption that Black Myth Wukong was going to get pushed out of the Game Awards, especially with how that game was treated up to its launch and then thereafter. It's actually funny. I saw a bunch of people go back to my video from a couple weeks ago talking about that very issue and trying to rub my face in the fact that I was wrong and that it got nominated. I'm just sitting here like, yeah, no, that's good. I'm happy that happened, especially after everything that game went through.
Yeah, I think it is very much important that is in fact a good thing, because, another game that had not so much luck, in fact, and that is Palworld, which, arguably had a quite similar hype. Yeah, somehow the journalists, the jury that is responsible for the nominees, seemingly didn't even wasted a thought on this game. And I think it is important to mention that it is indeed interest in a game like Black Myth Wukong became a place, that a game like Black Myth Wukong got its place, and a game like Palworld did not. So, yeah, additionally to that, we also have to be very honest that Black Myth Wukong is a very loaded game, especially in the culture war spheres. So, I do agree, though, that it is good that we see this game. I just think that there were more games that should have been considered. And if I had to guess, especially considering that we had the news yesterday or 2 days ago, that Nintendo is now really going for legal pursuits when it comes to Palworld. If I had to guess, then that is probably the reason why Palworld does not exist in the Game Awards this year.
What were you expecting? Hold on, I'll do it the right way. This is what you want. So this morning, I woke and I looked at myself in the mirror and I questioned everything about myself. But that doesn't mean that this year's award show isn't without controversy. There's actually plenty of it. Not only are we seeing a poker roguelike slip its way right into the Game of the Year category, but we're seeing a DLC and also even some underhanded or seemingly underhanded changes to the voting process before the nominees went up. Now, one of the things that I've actually seen quite a lot of recently is people asking, why are you even upset in the first place? Who cares about these awards? They're meaningless. It's nothing but a show of vanity more than anything else.
And that is absolutely true, but he has a different opinion.
But I'm here to tell you that they mean a little bit more than that. Many people dismiss the Game Awards as a shallow vanity showcase, a glitzy night where the industry insiders pat each other on the back and there's little substance that comes from it. But
so I don't think it's a vanity show. It kind of is a vanity show, but I think it's first and foremost an advertisement, an advertising show. That's literally how they make money. So that is, in my opinion, important to keep in mind. Because if you make money with advertisements, then your incentive is to get as many people watching the show as possible. Because then the Game Awards as a show, and especially the host, Jeff Keighley, they will make more money. So that's a goal. And that, if you keep that simple fact in mind, it explains a lot of things that are going on. Especially when they introduced things like the best creator of the year or stuff like that. These categories only exist to make more people watch the show. solely for that. But let's keep going.
This perspective overlooks the tangible benefits that ripple through the industry, particularly for the developers who win and the players who engage with their work. The Game of the Year award in particular serves as more than just a shiny badge. It's a moment of recognition that often carries significant financial and cultural weight. For developers, winning Game of the Year can be...
For the financial part, we can look at numbers in a second, but I don't think like recognition or cultural weight is anything that people attach to the Game Awards. Like, you need to keep in mind that we need to... Who are the people that are watching the Game Awards? And who are the people that might be influenced by the sticker Game of the Year winner, right? When you're talking about the Game Awards, we're talking about a show that is watched by hundreds of millions of people. And I would guess that most of these people know how meaningless these awards really are. And second of which are people that are maybe going into a store or, I don't know, on Steam. Is this even displayed on Steam? Maybe if they introduce, if they like put the sticker in a trailer or something like that. That somehow must have never heard of the Game Awards in any capacity. And then they need to think, hey, this is a sticker, like not any of those hundreds of other stickers that companies like to put on their products, right? Like the review scores from any magazine that they could pull out of their asses. That is completely meaningless. Like for these people, the sticker Game of the Year is probably similarly meaningless, like a 5 out of 5 or 10 out of 10 IGN rating, right? Because they simply don't know about the Game Awards, and the people that do know about the Game Awards know what type of show that is. So I don't think that the Game Awards do anything to elevate the cultural relevance of a game in any capacity. These people, these games are at the Game Awards because they already have cultural relevancy. That's what I'm saying, right? These games exist in here because they drive viewership. That's it. End of the story.
Transformative. It's not just a...
And again, I think Palworld is not here this year because I think Nintendo wouldn't be so happy about that.
Morale booster for the team. It's a marketing gold mine. A game that wins the award can see a surge in sales, especially with the Game Awards coming just before the holidays, as both new and returning players flock to see what made that game so special. It's the kind of exposure that the most...
So, sales. I already said we're talking about numbers. We need to keep in mind, this is a show that gets, in the last 3 years, over 100 million, before that, over 80 million viewers every year. Let's just look at the winners of the past 3 Game Awards and look if the numbers did go up. That can be in any way attributed to the Game Awards and not to either a sale or, well, holidays. Let's start with Baldur's Gate 3. Significant hit, right? We are talking here about player numbers of an all-time peak, and even the concurrent player numbers are still significant, what is actually crazy. Now let's see if the player numbers went up or not. Let's see if we can get... Okay, let's keep that. The Game Awards last year were December 7. So if we say, hey, they won the Game Awards, and therefore that must have any kind of impact that would make more people play the game, we would technically have to see in these 2 points a significant increase in player numbers, and in fact, the player numbers went down all the way, right? Even if we go to the detailed view, right? Then we are talking here about, again, 7th December, with an already slight upwards trend here, I feel. Right, 7th December, and then you have a few more players. But again, this is already going hard into the holiday times, Christmas times. And you will see this with every game here, that there is a slight increase, but not tangible. And if we are talking here about an award show that is watched by 80 to 110, 120 million people, I don't feel that like again, this is like the 7th. So afterwards, I feel the bumps should be significantly higher, right? This is not a lot. And everything that comes after that, right? That's why you have this bump here in player numbers. That's simply a sale. It's the first sale they ever did. It's the winter sale 2023. And you can see very clearly that the moment the sale hits, that's what makes player numbers rise. Of course, it's also holiday and stuff like that. Like, things are coming together here. But that is an actual spike. The first sale of the game. So, I don't know. Right? And the thing is, this is not a game that is already out like for the whole year, right? The actual release was just 2 months before that. 4 months before that. But what I mean is the game is relatively fresh. So if like the Game Award has like any tangible impact where people were like unsure if they should buy the game or not, and the Game Awards, that they won the Game Awards last year, would have an impact that made them believe that they now should maybe try the game because it won the Game Awards. I feel those numbers should be significantly higher. Again, it is really hard to know what here is can be attributed to the Game Awards or holidays. But again, if we just take like the more rougher view, this is like for the whole week basically. Overall, these are less players, and everything after that is the sale and the holidays, right? So Baldur's Gate, it did nothing. And let's look at Elden Ring, December 8th. And I will try to make it a little bit faster because it is basically the same story again. December 8th is here, it's a Thursday, and afterwards you don't see big changes at all. You see, even if you're very giving the benefit of the doubt, right? The only thing that you're seeing after the Game Awards is a rise in players of 6,000. For a game that had a peak of 950,000 players that played the game at the same time, that's a drop in the bucket, right? And then we had a first sale on, again, winter, December 2022. And then again, that's what makes this game peak again, together with the holidays, of course, right? But that there are still more people playing the game. This is probably simply because more people have bought the game at this point, and therefore more people play the game afterwards, right? It Takes Two is pretty much the only game where it might had an impact. The problem with It Takes Two is, we're talking about December 9th, is that this game was already constantly on sale, right? You see like this bump here, and then, yeah, but you can see here's already the bump, and these two bumps are there because the game was already on sale on November, and then on sale at December, and then you had afterwards again a sale, the winter sale of that year, where it was on sale again. So, and again, this is a small game. It won the Game of the Year awards, right? So if a game should have a significant increase in player numbers, like a significant increase in player numbers, then it should be a very small game that is not so well known already, right? So there are technically plenty of people out there that haven't played the game already, and you don't see anything of that, especially when it is on sale, right? It is constantly on sale, this game. So technically afterwards, this should be the absolute perfect time for people to buy this game in droves. And again, I don't see how you could attribute any of that to the Game Awards over the simple fact that it is on sale, right? Like, these are the deepest sales that the game had until then, and then it went even lower on December. So again, I don't think that the Game Award, the main award, has any significance whatsoever. Not culturally, not in terms of sales numbers or anything, not at all. You just need to go 5 to 10% lower in the next sale, and you will have more impact in winning this award, right? Nobody will learn. Again, you can just look at the list. God of War, Sekiro, Last of Us, Part 2, It Takes Two, Elden Ring, Baldur's Gate 3. These are not games that people somehow discover because they won Game of the Year, right? The only game that I found actually that had a significant increase in players was Balatro, due to its nomination as as a nominee of the Game of the Year award. And that is quite a different situation as with It Takes Two, because I personally think that Balatro is probably the most controversial game on this list. This game did not have an impact at all. It is a game in a niche that likes this game, as it seems. I haven't played it myself yet. Probably never will. I'm not into cards. But my personal problem with the Balatro is that we had indie hits over and over again in the past few years. And somehow this random ass card game that couldn't even break the 40k all-time peak in player numbers, which couldn't breach from one niche into other niches. I literally haven't heard of this game before it got nominated for the Game Awards. That this is a game that is like nominated in, I think, three awards this year, and it is just such a nothing burger. Even if it's a good game. My personal problem is, if you look at last year was the Vampire Survivor year, where this game literally stomped a whole freaking genre out of the ground. It had a literal, sizable, noticeable impact on the gaming industry. So many people have talked about this game and played that game or games like it, right? Vampire Survivor. Let's just look it up. And again, I think it's a little bit unfair to just compare Vampire Survivor to Balatro, for the simple fact that there are no Balatro likes, right? They just don't exist. But again, there were things happening that year, right? We had even a game like Vampire Survivor, which, let's be quite honest, is not a very attractive looking game, had 77,000 players at a peak. And it was probably after they released an add-on, a DLC, I guess. And again, Vampire Survivors did not happen last year. And I think if Vampire Survivor somehow was not considered to be a Game of the Year award nominee, and I don't see a game like Balatro that is basically irrelevant, right? Where I feel this little peak here alone, the fact that the nomination for being at the Game Awards and the controversy around this game that it got nominated in the first place had so big of an impact on the attention that the game got, I feel tells you more about if the game should have been nominated in the first place than about the effect of the Game Awards on this game. I think as an indie award nominee, perfectly fine. I don't care. But not as a Game of the Year award nominee. This is like my personal opinion, of course. But I don't see how someone could justify this game at all, right? Like, you can just, again, I will not compare every game that comes to my mind. You can look Stardew Valley, Terraria. I mean, these are games that also spawned similar games like them, and they themselves have had significantly higher player numbers. Just look at Stardew Valley, right? Stardew Valley has more concurrent players that this game had at peak, right? And that's like what I mean. It feels like Balatro has like somehow, I don't know why, got a secret Willy Wonka special nomination ticket here, but it simply wasn't the case for any other game in the years before, and I'm simply not a big fan of that. But again, Balatro is probably the only game where I would say that the Game Award, that the fact that it happened, that it was like, had like this connection, the nomination at the Game Awards, had a tangible effect on the attention that it got. It's the only game that I found in the whole of the Game Awards of the past few years where that statement would be true. And I don't know how much it was because it was nominated, over the fact that so many people talked about it because they didn't even know this game existed and were totally confused, right? So they looked into it and therefore it got more attention. Yeah, I feel this is more like a side effect almost of being a Game Award nominee than actually the effect of being at Game Awards.
Most aggressive advertising campaign can't buy, because it means that your game is genuinely one of the best of the year, if not the best of the year. Beyond,
I mean, this can be disputed, right? That is like the big. There's like this slight issue that I have with these kinds of award shows is, first and foremost, it doesn't really matter. The community doesn't have a say in the Game Awards at all. We have a 10 to 90% split, right? 10% of the voting power has the community. Again, also just a measure to make people vote for games and then to make them watch the show, so Jeff Keighley can make more money. That's the only reason why these 10% even exist in the first place. And 90% of the voting power comes from a jury of journalistic outlets, right, gaming outlets, of and I think creator might be part of it too in some way, but it's like the professionals, right, quote unquote. And yeah, the community doesn't matter. So saying that this signals that a game is possibly the best game of the year, I don't know if It Takes Two was the best game of the year, right? Again, I think every contestant can be disputed because I think people are simply subjective when it comes to their games. So I think there is not the best game of the year. The only best game is the best game of the year for you, right? And I don't think these award shows, I'm just not a big fan of it in the first place. But again, I guess he's right on one part that it can be used for PR, but again, I don't see the
immediate
effect.
revenue, it often cements the developer's reputation, making it easier for them to secure funding or creative freedom for future projects.
Wrong. Every single game, every single studio behind these games, except maybe for weird nominations like It Takes Two, none of these people were not known. None of these studios making these games needed more freedom, more. It doesn't need it, the affirmation of the Game Awards to be known or to be a recognized part of the gaming community. That's ridiculous, in my opinion, of a claim.
That recognition becomes a signal to investors and publishers that the studio is capable of delivering on excellence, giving them the leverage they might not have had otherwise. While a lot of,
again, might be true for indie games, I give them that. But first and foremost, it's the sales numbers. Beyond that, like, you cannot buy yourself anything with a win in an award show if your game does not sell, right? Imagine Dragon Age Veilguard would be in any shape or form a nominee for the Game of the Year. That would be a joke, considering how low the sales numbers are, right? This is like, if you want to convince investors, let's not go into the DEI stuff, but just have good sales numbers. That's the best way to convince investors to give you money. You don't need the Game Awards for that.
Sales can turn a lot of heads, continued recognition,
What, in my opinion, again, I've mentioned a bunch of indie games. What these indie games show very well, right? Like Stardew Valley, like Terraria, for example. You don't need much more.
Engagement and media representation can sometimes push these games even further beyond. Just using Baldur's Gate 3 as an example, while it soared at the start, smashing sales records for the company, it was ultimately recognized as the ultimate game of the year, earning the award on every professional stage across the entire industry, totaling 7 different Game of the Year wins. As a result, the game stayed in the news circuit, keeping invested players engaged in discussion outside of the game and helping it to reach the ears and eyes of more players around the world. Hell, it's still talked about.
Okay, listen. Simply not true. Right? Yes, players kept playing the game. But don't you think it is simply because it is a game that has a lot of replay value? You cannot tell me that the consistency of the player base, of the active player count, came because the game won awards. That is ridiculous. This bump happened because they had a sale. Everything after that was simply because the player base stuck with the game. Period. Nobody cared if the game won any awards. There is no tangible bump in here anywhere. It's just, I'm sorry. This claim is so far away from any truth. It is ridiculous, in my opinion.
And referenced.
And by the way, talking about all these other award shows, nobody cares about the other award shows. Period. I think the most well-known award show for games is in fact the Game Awards, and that's it. I don't think that even even 1%, 1% of the player base even knows any other Game Award shows.
Even a year later. While this is a testament to the excellence of the game itself, Baldur's Gate 3 is genuinely one of the best games in the last decade, if not one of the best games of all time. There are quite a few people that are out there that keep seeing this game talked about, keep seeing it win, and say, fine, okay, I'll try it. Now, players also reap the benefits.
I've already showed you,
in the
not
most
true.
obvious ways, but a Game of the Year win sets a bar for quality that other studios want to strive to meet. It tells the industry this is what resonated the most with an audience and critics alike, and developers take note.
Again, wrong. First and foremost, it shows what critics, quote-unquote, professional critics, voted for. That is true. But if something shows people or the industry what resonated with players, then it was the discussions, then it was the player numbers, the sales numbers, the general positive sentiment. I think it is such a weirdly arrogant approach to pretend like this comes from the Game Awards. The Game Awards are capitalizing on these things, not the other way around.
Of it. The success of games like Baldur's Gate 3, The Last of Us, Elden Ring, Breath of the Wild, all of these inspire trends in storytelling, world building, and gameplay mechanics that ripple into future titles. It raises expectations and in many cases pushes the industry forward. Even acknowledgement of smaller titles in other categories can give a moment of spotlight, bringing a niche experience to players who may not have discovered it otherwise. I can't tell you guys how many times I found an indie title or a gem that I otherwise hadn't heard.
Again, I think if anything, then it is true for indie games. And it's quite weird that this is like the only topic where he's quite quickly just talking over it, while he spent literal minutes talking about how the Game Awards are like
it was just because it was
important for the recognition of games.
At its best, the Game Awards is more than just a vanity parade. It's a cultural touchstone for the gaming community, celebrating not only what games are, but what they can be in the end. They drive innovation, give well-earned...
It's a touchdown event for the game critics, because the community doesn't matter, because they only have 10% of the voting power.
Recognition to creative teams and expose players to games that they otherwise may have overlooked. So while the event is undeniably flashy, its impact is far from superficial. It's a celebration that benefits the entire ecosystem. Now, I'm not...
So we have like 5 minutes of this stuff, and he doesn't show any proof of that. In any way, like it's just not there, and I feel it is a weird thing to say these things with such confidence, and then not being able to show any kind of proof, or in fact, if you look it up, you kind of see actually more the opposite of that, right? Where you can see that a measly 10% sale did more for the game's numbers of active players than the top prize in the world's biggest game awards show that was watched by 120 million people. Just saying. That is the level of irrelevancy for games that the Game Awards have.
Not saying that the Game Awards create success by any means. It's just that they're giving them a little bit of an extra nudge, that little extra added momentum that's helping them get even more successful than what they were at the very start. And this is especially true for holiday buyers, because they walk into stores, or maybe they see an ad pop up on social media or on an app or something like that. They see that a game has that Game of the Year sticker, and they think that it's a solid buy, a great Christmas gift for somebody. And chances are, more times than not...
Again, I've already talked about that. The people that don't know about the Game Awards shows, that would buy games based on stickers on a game cover. Like, they are very much used to having stickers on game covers. They are very much used to have random award shows, like a dozen award shows, telling them, oh, it's the best game in this random magazine that nobody has ever heard about. Or it's like this 5 out of 5 or 4 out of 5, 9 out of 10 game from a journal that, I don't know, 10 people are even reading. I don't think the impact is particularly high. And I don't even know if we're talking like physical copies of games, if they're even fast enough to like print that stuff on a cover. Like, if anything, you have to imagine that like the store employees would really just take stickers and put them on the games. I don't know.
They're right.
Yeah,
that ends
I
up
don't
being
know.
the case. I know for years my mom almost always would buy me the Game of the Year game because it was the easiest choice for her to make because she didn't really understand the games or the hobby or anything like that. And, you know, as a kid and then even then after, yeah, it worked almost every single time. But
I mean, I don't know how old he is. But we gotta keep in mind that the Game Awards only existed since 2014. So I guess he's like in his mid-20s. Unless he's saying that his mom bought him games when he was in his mid-teens that got like this award sticker that did not matter that much back then, if we are quite honest. Based on that, and that is like a big, good anecdotal evidence point to make. I don't know. I guess people were buying games based on these stickers, but I'm relatively sure that at least his mom probably did not buy a lot of games based on the Game Award sticker, right? I feel if he...
You know, the thing is that it goes
I would
beyond
doubt
that.
it.
It's also just the recognition of being nominated in the first place. In a lot of cases, especially for the players, this is a way for us to come across games that we otherwise didn't have any interest in or maybe didn't even see at all. I think one of the best examples of this is Balatro. The game is...
Again, I already talked about it. I think most people, especially Steam, like Steam is really good in finding out what games you might like and what games you might not like. So in most cases, if there is a game coming out that you might like, then Steam is going to do things that will show you this game. You will get in contact with that game. And what he's now going to do...
exploded all of a sudden. Now everybody's talking about it, and for the most part, the vast majority of these folks haven't even heard of it. And honestly, they should probably be thankful of that. I have over 400 hours in the game, and I wish that I could get that time back. No, I actually don't wish I could get that time back. I don't know where that time went. I thought I only played it for like 10 hours, but sometimes I hear the music in my sleep. That's the power of these awards. That's what they can do for...
Exactly. He's cherry picking out this one game that only got this bump in attention because literally nobody knew that it existed in the first place. What, as I have already explained, I think is more an indicator for the big question, why the frick it is even nominated in the first place. That's everything I have to say. I could understand a Pal World significantly more or as a Game of the Year nominee than this game. I am sorry. No, I'm not. No, I'm not. I think Balatro is... I don't know how this game got there, but again, the effects that this game has, and again, these are still not crazy numbers, right? We're talking about 14,000 people buying a game that costs you barely anything, right? It costs you $12. As a key, I've seen this game for $7, right? Like, this is not a very expensive game. If the game were $30, I think this increase in player numbers would have probably been halved, if at all, right? This game is heavily benefiting from the Game Awards, but that is pretty much only because it is like a zebra in the middle of a horde of horses. It stands out in any shape or form, and mostly because it is kind of weird that it is part of this group of horses, right?
These companies, it's also what they can do for the players. Not only is it setting an example for games that we want in the future, and it's exposing players to games that we otherwise would have overlooked, but it's just that recognition that a lot of these studios deserve for the hard work that they put in delivering something that we actually wanted. And I think that's one of the most important part. But Let's not kid ourselves. At the end of the day, we love validation. It's one of the reasons why we like social media so much, is because we like seeing the little dots and likes and updates and all that good stuff. And we want to have our opinions validated. And we love to see the game that we love the most voted as the best game of the year. And, you know.
And again, the big problem here is I absolutely agree that here is a lot of tribalism going on from different gaming communities. But again, people don't have any voting power. That is the whole point. So this complete point of like this validation thing. Like, if we take that as a reference point of validation for anything, you could also just go on IGN and look what wins there, the Game of the Year award, or on any other kind of journal, or from any other of those completely, let's be honest, meaningless other award shows for games. Like, it just doesn't matter. And other award shows actually have higher percentages of community votes or are completely community voted, even when that is then turns very often more into a dick comparison between communities. And so again, I think this whole angle of like validation for the community doesn't exist if the whole community's voting power is 10%. Right?
No, there are a couple surprises this year. Paul Teci of Forbes wrote up a solid summary in an article titled "What Got a Game Awards 2024 Game of the Year Nomination and What Didn't." Writing the nominees, Astrobot, the platforming love letter to PlayStation, is one of the best entries in the genre in years, and it's no surprise that it's a celebration of not just the PlayStation IP, but what feels like gaming in general is nominated here. I would personally consider this the frontrunner. Metaphor ReFantazio, a stunning new RPG entry from Atlas of Persona fame. This latecomer immediately captivated audiences and launched it into a surprise Game of the Year contention, which has been realized with the nomination here. It could definitely win. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth.
The crazy thing about ReFantazio is that this game came out, I think, a few weeks before even the nominees came out. So that is completely crazy. You just look, the game came out October, right? It's like 3 weeks before we got the nominees. That's ridiculous. That's crazy. I mean, it was relatively popular, right? 85,000 isn't a crazy number, but it was relatively popular. Let's be fair, that name is hard to sell, but that is also kind of a zebra for me, right? Like 3 weeks and you're a nominee. It's kind of crazy. But again, I think it's fine. I don't really care.
This was
I've heard a lot of good things about it.
In terms of landing a nomination, beloved by critics and most fans. A win, less guaranteed, but it feels like it's dueling for the top 2 or 3 for sure.
Yeah, I think you can't say a lot against Final Fantasy. Right, it has a big player base, it has a loving community, and they are solid games as far as I can tell.
With Wukong, it has both a whole lot of fans and set explosive sales records thanks to its popularity globally, but especially in China. It's an extremely competitive year and the game reviewed well, albeit not spectacularly, and I wasn't expecting it to make the cut. I was wrong. Here it is on the list, selected by a jury, landing a top spot. A win does feel difficult given the competition, but we'll see. Balatro, unlike anything on this list, the brilliant card game has been a sleeper mega hit all year, and I thought it might slide into a nomination here. You love to see it.
No.
Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree. In the last few days, there has been a flurry of drama over the fact that the Game Awards confirmed that yes, DLC or expansions could be nominated for Game of the Year. While the immediate aftermath of this discussion was about a likely nomination or even win for Shadow of the Erdtree, it was still up to the voters whether they considered whether or not they would count it. Enough did, it seems. Could it win now? That would spark some more opinions. Now, these are the games that did not receive nominations. Helldivers 2, an explosively popular game that shattered perceptions of whether Sony could produce a live service hit. It has certainly had its ups and downs since its release, but it's hard to forget that stellar initial launch period, and it's a multiplayer entry that failed to get a nomination. This may be the biggest snub if we're playing that game. Silent Hill 2. This one was bound to be controversial as a remake, but Silent Hill 2 put up...
So honestly, I don't have a lot of opinions on Wukong or Helldivers, honestly. I feel it would be a kick in the balls if Helldivers would win the best ongoing game or something like that, because this award is hands down for No Man's Sky. There's literally not a single other game in the whole gaming space that, in my opinion, would deserve the prize for the best ongoing game more than No Man's Sky. Like, I'm sorry, Helldivers can get the fuck off, especially after Sony did this very much, in my opinion, anti-consumer move with, literally kicking out literal countries from being able to play the game. I'm sorry, no. But again, Helldivers 2 had its up and downs, and I'm not sure if it's like worthy game of the year in the greater scheme of things.
A large amount of
more than Balatro, that is, of course.
Nominations overall before the Game of the Year slate was ever even announced.
Let's continue.
It did not, however, land an actual Game of the Year nomination itself, which was a bit of a surprise.
I have no opinions on this game or the franchise at all.
Dragon Age: The Veilguard. There was some theorizing that games journalists would rally behind this game to get it nominated, but despite its solid enough reviews and many Dragon Age fans enjoying it, it's not exactly a product similar in the full-on glory days of BioWare, and as such, it did not land a nomination. Legend of Zelda...
Let's be honest, even the most dishonest journalists know that Dragon Age: The Veilguard was an absolute stinker of a game. Like, you could have not put this game in the nomination list and would have not summoned a gigantic, epic shitstorm from the gaming community. No chance.
Echoes of Wisdom.
They know that. And again, they know that, and they don't want bad PR for their advertisers, because then Little Joff gets less money.
A departure from the traditional Zelda game, but still a bit of a surprise that it didn't represent Nintendo on the Game of the Year list. I suppose it's not a mainstream entry, but you don't often find Nintendo missing out on a best game contender during a given year. Tekken 8. A 90 Metacritic score might normally guarantee a placement on the list in most years, but Tekken suffers from being in the relatively niche fighting game genre where it will unfortunately be overlooked by most voters. It's likely a favorite for best fighting game of the year, obviously.
The relatively niche. I could just continue to stomp further on Balatro. Tekken also had its up and downs. I think it is just mixed on Steam as well.
Now that we've gone over the summaries, a few of these games stand out amongst the rest, and they've caused quite a bit of criticism. Helldivers 2 not being in the running, Silent Hill...
Like, I feel if you can't even make your niche happy, then you're obviously doing something wrong in the first place, so I don't know why it should have been nominated as a game of the year.
While a remake was still received incredibly well, Balatro is an indie hit that many haven't heard of, but it still made the list, and Dragon Age: The Veilguard, for all of the praise that it got, ended up just being in the accessibility category next to Diablo 4, which, let's be real, that's more or less them just thanking them for coming. I'm genuinely shocked that Palworld wasn't mentioned anywhere, and well, then again, the media really torched that game on release, but the biggest sore thumb is Elden Ring: Shadow of the Erdtree, a DLC. This has to be the first time ever that we've ever seen a DLC creep into the category of Game of the Year, and people have been talking about it. While most people seem to generally agree that a DLC shouldn't be in the running for Game of the Year and are upset that it likely will push out whatever their favorite game is, there are some in game development and games media that have begun to push back. As an example, Greg Miller of Kinda Funny Games tweeted out saying DLC should be eligible for Game of the Year. It's a game people played this year. If it's that good, it should be honored. Thomas Mahler of Moon Studios also tweeted out saying, it seems that a few people are upset that the Elden Ring DLC has been nominated for the Game of the Year award at this year's Game Awards. Let me be clear, I'm 100% on board with this decision and told Jeff Keighley the same a few months ago. The industry is changing and we're moving from box products and sequelitis more towards games that are kept alive. It makes sense to do so. I think that in the future, we're going to see more and more games that are treated as mere platforms that are receiving updates continuously, and we should celebrate those achievements just as much as we are celebrating entirely new products. Now, I could go through a ton of other examples. A lot of the conversation is revolving around the exact same thing, but I just want to say that the quality and vastness of the content is not in contention. Shadow of the Erdtree was exactly what fans wanted and more. It's one of the biggest highlights this year. It was one of the things I was looking forward to playing most this year. With that said, it doesn't matter if Shadow of the Erdtree was 4 times the size of Elden Ring. It's a DLC, not a game. You have to own the base version of Elden Ring to play it. It's not a standalone title. And from my perspective, this sets a bad precedent, not only for the Game Awards, but for the industry, especially because now we are just normalizing games, especially single player games, becoming a continued platform that is recognized for the same achievements as newly minted titles. Developers making brand new games incurring significantly more risk in doing so. They're not just.
Okay. There's a lot going on. First and foremost, DLC is nothing new for the Game Awards. Witcher 3 Blood and Wine won, in fact, best role-playing game in 2016. So I don't know what the issue is. First and foremost, it is not new for the Game Awards specifically. And on top of that, I think this whole discussion, first and foremost, that we still call things like Blood and Wine, things like Shadow of the Earth Tree, DLCs, I think is so disrespectful, because I feel you're putting these products on the same level as cut content that developers are selling you as like cosmetic packs or like costume packs. You're putting it on the same level as pay to win and pay to convenience stuff you can see in the Steam store. I'm sorry, I don't like this at all. 10 years ago, these things would have been called either add-on or expansion. And I think that is what these games should, or these products, these DLCs, these fast content updates, paid content updates, I think that is what they should be called, right? First and foremost, that is it. I think using DLCs for that is just so disrespectful. Second, I think it's ridiculous, because saying, oh, you need a base game, and therefore it should not be nominated as a Game of the Year. So you're saying if the game would have come out as a standalone game, then suddenly it would have been eligible, despite that everything else would have been the same? Okay. So I don't feel this is like an argument, in my opinion. I feel these products have the necessary content, they have the necessary quality, absolutely on the level, and very often even beyond that, of an actual new game. And I think the whole argument of but it's just a content update. It's just something that continues this product that already existed. I'm sorry, guys, but we are talking now about 10, 15 years where we have literal franchises that do the same freaking thing every goddamn year with just slight adjustments. Like what are we talking about? I'm sorry. It's just ridiculous to even pretend that Shadow of the Earth Tree is somehow went less work into than like in the yearly Call of Duty, right? I just say Modern Warfare 3, where they just reuse assets from Warzone in a campaign. I'm sorry, but this argument is so wrong for so many reasons. I mean, are you telling me that like something like Starfield is like such a new product if you compare it to literally, if you can literally just compare it to Fallout 4, and it's just 90% the same game, just with it's even a worse game, just with a different coat of paint on it? That's ridiculous. I'm sorry. I do think that we need to judge these products on a case-by-case basis, but I think if we are talking about products like Shadow of the Earth Tree, or again, Blood and Wine, I think they should be absolutely eligible for a nomination of the Game of the Year. I'm sorry, it's just ridiculous that we have this discussion in the first place. And I feel many people are just talking, are just repeating the stuff that some content creators saying themselves. Yeah, I do not like this stance at all. Like we have so many games that get expansions, that get add-ons, more in the online space. But I think why do we need to discourage developers from making add-ons of beloved games? Do we need to pretend that people would celebrate a big add-on for Baldur's Gate 3 less than a new game from another series? But because the other series is a standalone game, that you then would nominate that game and not the big add-on with maybe literally the same amount of quality, maybe even more than Baldur's Gate 3? I'm sorry, I feel this whole argument is the moment you think about it for just a few seconds, it's crumbling into dust. And I don't know.
Achievements
I
as
just don't
newly
agree.
minted titles. Developers making brand new games incurring significantly more risk in doing so. They're not
Again,
just continuing.
I simply don't think that this is the truth, because we can see year after year after year how risk averse developers and publishers are, especially in the big gaming space. No matter if the game, if it's a new game or not, right? Like if we want to go for this whole take a risk, be creative, then I think we should disqualify every game that is a sequel of a series and only nominate completely new IPs. Then we could make a point, maybe, right? Like we just need to think about it. If Shadow of the Earth Tree, if the issue is that it's just a continuation of the thing that already exists, then Final Fantasy shouldn't be nominated as well, because it is just a continuation of the first part. And as far as I know, using the same engine, same developers, does the same stuff. It is not even like a new idea, considering it's basically just a remake, right? So it is basically has the same issues, if we go with this argument, as Shadow of the Earth Tree, plus is not even a new idea on top of that. So honestly, the only argument that you can make for we don't want to have an add-on as a nominee is it is not a standalone. And I think if that's the only argument in favor of not including a product, an experience like Shadow of the Earth Tree, I'm sorry, but I feel we are doing some crazy mental gymnastics here right now. Like, this is literally just the easiest point of attack that people had at that point to say it is a DLC. Why is not my game on this list? And that's the only thing that actually happened in this whole situation. And I just don't think it is worth it to play these stupid games. For an award show that, again, it doesn't matter anyway.
Game that's already successful. DLC is released every single year for an assortment of games. There is no reason that there shouldn't be a...
Again, I already explained why I hate it, that we put all kinds of DLCs into the same box. I hate it so much. And it, honestly, this is like something where the credibility for me of this channel is taking quite a nosedive, honestly. Again, I've already shown you the issues with many of his arguments that literally cannot be proven in any way, that he also doesn't care himself to put any kind of proof on the screen. And again, that you don't make this differentiation between a full-blown expansion of a game versus cut content and pay-to-win / pay-to-convenience stuff. Oof.
Category for best DLC, or for the games with the DLC to be included in best ongoing game. Are we supposed to believe that making a DLC...
The problem what we have with DLCs is there are not that many add-ons that are coming out every year. We need to keep that in mind. Like, just, I don't know, just tell me 10 games in the last 2 years that had an add-on. Like, the only thing that you could do at some point is that you have to fill up the last 2 or 3 places every year with some random slop DLC. Like, I don't know, you know? It's just, there are simply not many DLCs that are coming out that are even in the ballpark, that are even in the same galaxy as Blood and Wine or Shadow of the Earth Tree.
Is just as challenging as creating a new IP from the ground up. So from my perspective, it actually feels as though Shadow of the Earth Tree is more or less a proxy that was put in place to block the nomination of something else entirely. Whether that was
Weird. He again said the name Balatro Falls. Weird.
Space Marine 2 or Helldivers 2 or maybe even Dragon Age the Veilguard. Now, I realize this is more of a conspiracy than anything else, but keep in mind, Paul just said there were some rumblings of games journalists that were trying to push Dragon Age the Veilguard through, regardless of everything else that was going on around that game, and maybe forcing Elden Ring Shadow of the Earth Tree into the conversation blocked that game or some other game from being nominated. It's too easy to vote for. It's likely the most widely played game this year by the most people and one of the most well-known names in all of gaming. It would be...
And still he is writing the point that it should not be a nominee for the Game of the Year, as one, if not the most played game slash, in my opinion, add-on slash, in his opinion, DLC this year. This is ridiculous. And instead we have fucking not even 40k peak game
like
on his list.
Baldur's Gate 3 released a DLC. It would be the exact same thing because it's the most popular game. It's one of the most talked about games and everybody has seen it, especially if we're talking about the panelists that they've included in this. And we're going to talk a little bit on that as well.
And again, it would have deserved that place.
I've seen a lot of chatter about Balatro specifically. While there's been some people pointing out Shadow of the Erdtree, a lot of it's actually been pointed at Balatro and saying that it doesn't deserve to be on the list. And while I think you could maybe make a case for some of the other indie hits that came out this year, the game deserves its nomination. For the people that are out there that are just thinking that the game is purely poker, I'm sorry. You haven't played the game. You have absolutely no idea what you're talking about. The amount of people that are trying to minimize this game while saying that all the other games are that much more innovative and creative when they're quite literally just copies of other games themselves is ridiculous to me. It is. And plus, on top of that, I just personally really like the story of how the game came to be in the first place. Guys working a part-time job or a full-time job while he, at the exact same time, is working on a game for like 2 years, trying to put this together by himself to make a portfolio so that he can get a job in game development. The game explodes. It blows up. It's already spawned copycat games. It sold millions of copies. It really is a innovative, interesting game. Super fun to play. I recommend it to everybody. I made a video on it like 7 months.
Maybe you have noticed that he did not brought up a single point that would actually justify the point, that would actually justify Balatro being a nominee. The game did not blow up. I have not seen any copycat games. Despite, again, this game came out in February, if I am correctly. February. This game couldn't punch through its own bubbles. This game could not, again, it is ridiculous. I would just repeat everything that I've said. He is not able to put up a single good point in favor of the game, and I don't give the slightest shit about the story, how the game came to be. One-man developers, like how many are there in the gaming space that are working full-time and just create games in the hopes that something will stick? I mean, again, haven't we had the story several times? I already pointed out at Vampire Survivors, Terraria, Stardew Valley. These are all projects of single people or very, very, very small teams. Nothing special whatsoever.
Months ago, you guys need to go watch that. It was actually really good. But it's one of those games that I definitely think does deserve its spot. With that said, I will say that there is some serious inconsistency.
It is so good that he couldn't even point out a single innovation and a single good point why it should be a nomination. And instead he talked about the circumstances.
With some of these nominations, and I think the reason why is because of how these awards are being conducted. Not only is it some of the changes that they made, to their website, to their rulings, to the games that could be nominated, but it's also the paneling. And I understand why players are upset about a lot of the nominations or how this is being handled, because they don't feel like they're being represented. To be honest with you, with some of the things I've seen people talking about, well, they don't want to see you represented. Ever. In an article from The Gamer titled "The Game Awards Has a Bigger Problem Than Shadow of the Erdtree," the writer Stacey Henley effectively hand waves the players' questions and criticisms, saying that the rules haven't changed last minute and these awards were always going to be controversial. While at the exact same time, the article only cites itself and refers to itself when using that as proof. Literally every single link on this entire article is just referring to another one of their own articles or another writer from The Gamer. This article is all in response to people taking notice of a few things before the nominations were revealed and some of the changes that were made over on the Game Awards official website. One of the first being that DLCs were now recognized where they hadn't been in the past. Again, something that feels...
I already showed you Witcher 1, that thing. I could have gone through other years, in fact, to see if there were more DLCs, but I would expect that DLCs, quote-unquote, DLCs, again, I hate this word so much for expansions like this, they are simply quite rare, period, right? So, yeah, I think even if DLCs would be eligible for that, I don't think you would have seen many of them in the first place, simply because DLCs of that caliber are simply rare as frick, right?
Artificial, especially for this occasion specifically, because if not, then we would have seen Cyberpunk's Phantom Liberty nominated last year, but we didn't. Now, along with all this, players also noticed that the voting is calculated with a voting jury taking up a whopping 90% of the vote, while players and fans only make up 10%, meaning that players are only a deciding factor in the event of a tie, and even then, their votes are likely not even a factor. And that's the reason why players are raising questions over the
Correct.
awards, because they feel like they aren't being heard or represented. And in fact, we know that we're not being represented. The panel of judges are from outside outlets that have nothing to do with gaming at all. Looking at some of the outlets in the US, we have Entertainment Weekly, the LA Times, the New York Times, Pride.com,
Yep.
Rolling Stone, the
Yep.
Atlantic, NPR, and Variety. Looking at the UK, we have Discussing Films and The Mirror. Many of these sites and magazines are nothing more than celebrity gossip and tabloid magazines.
Crazy.
Nothing representative of gaming culture, the perspective of players, or representative of the industry in any way. I'll be straight with you guys. This makes no sense to me whatsoever. I know
It makes a lot of sense. These are all magazines that want advertisers. Again, we are only talking about interests here, monetary interests, nothing else. This show is not for the gamers, and in fact, the show isn't even for the developers. I don't know if he probably does not point it out. So let me point it out. Maybe people still remember the Please Wrap It Up. So the short version of the story is Baldur's Gate 3. The short version of the story, need to go a little bit back. God of War won this game, and if I remember correctly, the voice actor for Kratos had quite a long of a speech. And at some point after that, they introduced this god-awful, it's technically a big teleprompter, right? Where they remember people, right? We have like this countdown, and then they remember people to please shut the fuck up and go off the stage, right? And it seems that it's like the first time last year that was when this teleprompter happened that way. I think before that you had like a bell or something like that, which signals the thing. But yeah, if you want to know how much this Game Award shows cares about the game developers, the people that make the games that are meant to be awarded there, that is how much they care about the developers. Either it is not about the community, it is not about players, it is not about rewarding games for anything, because again, these award shows do not matter, and they don't care about the developers either. This is just a show for advertisers, from advertisers, and in the middle is a Geoff Keighley that makes a lot of money. That's it.
that Geoff Keighley has been pushing for the award show to be more like the Grammys or something like that, upping the ante each year, but this feels like groveling at Hollywood's doorstep more than anything else. Jeff, we're winning. Our industry dwarfs music and television by a country mile. We do not need their approval, and frankly, the last thing that any video game player wants is Hollywood's influence in the gaming industry. Henley chalks up the awards being controversial no matter what because of toxic gamers, hand-waving their concerns, saying maybe it's more controversial this year because of everything that's going on in gaming. There are a few who dread Shadow of the Erdtree's potential nomination on quality. It's roundly considered an excellent expansion to an excellent video game. The issue is the principle of the thing, and gaming has been short on principle this year. A groundswell of toxicity has risen.
Again, I don't think that the issue is that they re-enabled add-ons to be part of the Game Awards. I think the big issue is more that they seemingly disabled add-ons for a few years for whatever reason whatsoever.
Unchecked this year in gaming. It has an outsized influence in the YouTube algorithm and on X, the everything app, as long as it aligns with Elon Musk's increasingly erratic views. But
what is not really true, but
it is still disheartening to see gaming companies shove their fingers in their ears, though it's impressive that they manage to do this while their heads are buried in the sand at the same time. I don't expect Keeley to address this on the show, and I don't think he could say anything to help, but his stay out of everything attitude will not wash this time. He'll be in the meat grinder with the rest of us, and it remains to be seen how a man buoyed by populism and never having a public opinion beyond loving a video game deals with that. She then goes on to say that if Black Myth Wukong and Stellar Blade don't sweep the awards, then gamers are going to feel like the entire thing is rigged. And after stating, when these folk demand Black Myth and Stellar Blade sweep the board, I see replies like, what about Final Fantasy? What about Astrobot? What about Metaphor? What about Infinite Wealth? What about Dragon's Dogma? What about Balatro? What about 1000 Times Resist? And the reply I see from these apparent fans is always the same.
But that can be said for every game. Again, most people have not played all of these games. This whole argument is complete bullshit. And honestly, I don't think that Stellar Blade was that crazy great from what I have seen, that it would have stuck out, besides the fact that it gave players what they wanted without putting any kind of weird moral or political beliefs into it. Right, it was just a game that was true to itself, to the vision, to the fan service, right? But I don't think it's like a top contender for anything. And again,
I haven't played most of them. These people don't even have opinions on games. They just like being mad. They're the only people who ever cared about Dustborn or Unknown 9, and yet they parade around their heads as if they bested Rob Stark. If this campaign had started a few months earlier, Hogwarts Legacy being snubbed at the Game Awards 2023 would have been huge news. People that like Black Myth Wukong and Stellar Blade are immediately looped into the group of these people.
I mean, right, we don't have to talk about the fact that Hogwarts Legacy was, as far as I know, not even nominated. But if I remember correctly, that it was simply not really relevant for the Game Awards last year. And come on, we know why, right? It's not because the game didn't have an impact, not because the game wasn't good. I'm not a Harry Potter fan, but I've heard many good things about the game overall. Even this whole culture wars bullshit aside.
Games that only had controversy because it was manufactured by games media, and the players felt that they had to stand up to protect those games that they love and enjoyed, and they want to make sure that those games are recognized. Right. So the only solution to players not feeling represented by the industry is to have the industry speak out against those players that you disagree with, to put them in their place. And you're upset that Jeff Keighley doesn't want to get caught in the middle of that and feels like it's not his place to do so. This is no different than the media campaign to get Keighley to say anything about industry layoffs. Like, that would have any impact outside of virtue signaling over something that you can't control and ultimately don't even understand. If you're wondering where all of this is coming from, it's because we're already dealing with so many issues where players are not feeling represented by these gaming outlets. Our perspectives are not shared, and oftentimes it feels like the media's perspective seems adversarial to its own audience. That's why players are speaking out. It's only controversy because you made it controversy. The disparity in representation of the Game Awards voting process highlights a troubling disconnect between the event and the games that it's supposed to celebrate. When 90% of the vote is controlled by a jury of industry professionals, who actually, a lot of them have nothing to do with gaming at all, it undermines the credibility of the awards.
But again, I've explained everything that's going on there. It is. I don't even think it is worth it to be mad about it. This whole thing is a nice platform for advertisers, nothing else. And that's why it is not surprising that there are outlets that have nothing to do with gaming. Why community does not have any power in the votings. It's just, I don't know, it's just, it is not confusing, it is not surprising. This whole Game Awards show is simply meaningless to vast amounts, also worthless for all participants. And the only thing that happens is that these Game Awards will stir up a lot of attention, a lot of drama. And the only people that will benefit from it are Geoff Keighley.
Players see this as yet another
and the outlets and the people that want to advertise. But again,
example of their voices being sidelined, a reoccurring theme in a relationship between gaming media and its audience. This isn't about players just wanting popular games to win. It's about us feeling like our preferences, priorities, and experiences are dismissed in favor of industry politics or critical preferences that don't align with the average player's perspective. Players invest countless hours into games, dissecting mechanics, narrative depth, and the passion behind the development process. I think what we're seeing right now is a massive contrast in the games industry because of social media, the internet, and gaming's explosive popularity, where gamers are now more educated and engaged with these games than the journalists that are scoring them and the panelists that are awarding them. Players love their...
But it's not hard to do. I mean, you need to keep in mind that, like, the vast space of gaming, YouTube, it is just, of course, that the gaming community as a whole is more educated than random journalists from random outlets that put their morals and political views over their, well, job.
Games. Of course, they're going to be upset when they see that their favorite game isn't being recognized. But when they see an industry that is constantly pushing back against them, that's including gossip magazines to vote the best game of the year, who are you to say that they're wrong? And I think that's my biggest concern when it comes to all of this. It's that growing divide between games media and the games industry and the players. And it just keeps getting bigger and bigger. And you're only making...
I don't see this at all, honestly. Like, unless you're saying games media is only these outlets like IGN, The Gamer, whatever. In my opinion, games media is every single creator on the platform. What he is doing with his video, what I'm currently doing with my video reaction to his video, that is as much, and in my opinion, very often even more games journalism than what many of these magazines are doing on a regular basis. And I don't think there is a lot of disconnect between games media and the gaming community at all. I think that the connection is actually so strong and grew so much in the past 15 years since YouTube exists that games media and gamers are as connected as possible, as maybe as connected as they will ever be again. Simply because every gamer is at this point able to find people that represent themselves, that have their tastes, that play the games that they like to play, that have opinions that they think are relatable. Games media is so much better than it was 15 years ago, where you only had these single-site, quite powerful news and review aggregators that were always, since the very start, the slaves of access journalism, of having deals with the gaming developers or publishers, exclusive interviews. None of that happened because the developers were just nice people and liked to spend thousands of bucks on a handful of journalists to come over. No. Games media that got literally democratized. Democratized, right? And yeah, I think we have a similar situation like with calling Shadow of the Earth 3 and DLC. I think saying that the gaming media, the outlets, the IGNs of this world are representing games media, I don't think that's the case. And I think that's the exact point why people are more and more annoyed by these outlets, because they still pretend that they have any weight in this industry anymore. When you have people like freaking Asmongold, that at this point, half of his content is political, right? He makes 3 videos in 3 days, and he probably gets more views on these 3 videos than the whole of IGN in a couple of weeks. That's, in my opinion, how irrelevant many of these outlets are these days. And that's, in my opinion, something that we need to consider whenever we, for whatever reason, start to give a shit about meaningless award shows like this.
Making it worse when you're adding in NPR and Variety and Rolling Stone and New York Times and LA Times. What do they have to do with video games? Let's be real. The vast majority of these outside outlets are likely going to vote based on popularity, whether or not they've heard of the game or not, because they likely haven't even played them in the first place. And what is...
Then how did Balatro end up on the list if popularity is such a huge...
that serve to do? Does that share the perspective of the players? No, I don't think that it does at all. So of course players are going to push back against it. Of course players are going to feel like it's somewhat unfair, because in truth it is unfair. And I think it's really important that these games are represented the way that they should be, because there are some really tangible benefits to being nominated, to being awarded. And,
No.
from a player's perspective, if I see Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree win Game of the Year, am I going to be happy? Sure, I really liked it. It was really good, but I also don't think that that sends the best message to the industry. What are we teaching them? What are we telling them? Are we going to be optimistic about it?
What we are telling them is to make a huge expansion that is absolutely worth the money that it costs for a game that is already beloved by its community, that expands this game further so players can enjoy even more of this beloved game, that this can be rewarded as well, even when it's just a meaningless award. That's what you're teaching the industry with that. Simple as that. We can make an easy point. Imagine Blood and Wine and Heart of Stones would have been they wouldn't have gone anywhere, right? Not successful, no awards, nothing like that. If that would have been the case, Cyberpunk wouldn't have gotten his DLC. And I haven't played it. Many people say that's the best experience that Cyberpunk offered to them. If that is a consequence of teaching companies, even with worthless prizes like this, that add-ons and expansions for beloved games that offer a lot of content and quality, if the result is that we get more of that, then please,
And say
let us teach them more of that.
We just need to make really good deals.
I take this every freaking day over the Dragon Age Veil Guards, over the Dustborns, over the Unknown Nines, over... I mean, let's be honest. We had so many games that were new IPs, that were complete garbage. And I think Shadow of the Erdtree is... I would take this every freaking time over the baseline that games need to be new IPs, or at least new standalone games.
Are they going to say, hey, our single player games, why do we need to make sequels to any of these? Why should we bother making new IPs? Maybe instead what we should do is just continue to add on to the games that we already have, which they've been doing in the past, but maybe now they want to push into it even further.
Good. So, another point that I wanted to make, and that, before I forget it, is think about the gacha games industry that we have. Games like Genshin, games like now this year Wuthering Waves, even many of the other gacha games with which, instead of having an open world but have more like a level structure, that's exactly what these games are doing, and they are successful as fuck. But they are featuring predatory monetization models. And in my opinion, if you could, let's just assume you would get a Zelda, right? Zelda Breath of the Wild. And instead of getting a sequel to the game, you could just have the story end and then add something at this game that might even expand the game even more. I think Warhammer Total War did something really cool with that, where despite that you had like these sequels, you could just combine the whole map of all 3 Warhammer Total War games, right? What is like a cool middle way, in my opinion. So wouldn't it be, if that is obviously popular, if that is obviously something that people want, to have a game that you can buy, that you can like, and you can just, even if it's a single player game, right? I mean, multiplayer games do this for 25 years, right? Bring out expansions that make the world bigger, that make the game bigger, that expand the story and experience of these games, introduce new features, new ideas, stuff like that. Why does it somehow is seemingly not allowed for the single player space? I would have no freaking issue with the just massive games, right? Just give me an MMO where you kick away the multiplayer and the online, and just give me a game that has the monetization model of giving me every year or every 2 years a sizable, significant expansion that lets me have more cool adventures in this world, right? You could do this easily with a single player RPG. Easily. No questions asked. And I don't think that the people would complain about it. as long as the core game is good, right? Nobody is going to make an add-on for Dragon Age Veilguard, obviously, or other games that came out this year. Again, this is literally something that has a very simple mechanic of game comes out, game is beloved, developers see that the game is beloved, developers see that gamers want more, so they develop more and sell this. They don't have to introduce all this crazy budget predatory monetization stuff, right? And if it means that the game takes less risks because it is just an add-on, right? And therefore they don't feel the need to have extra monetization in their games to make up these risks, then yes, I see absolutely a beneficial way of a new way of thinking, of giving players what they want, of giving players more of what they want. Where is the issue? I don't see it, honestly. It's ridiculous. And I really don't understand. I feel if you make this point over and over and over and over again in this video, I feel you haven't even thought about it on like a very practical level. And I think this is like such a weird thing, because you just put a blockade in front of people's thoughts instead of actually letting them think about what could be a possible result out of that. Because there's no risk, right? If developers bring out a bad game and then they think they could just expand the game, then people will just not buy the expansion. That's it, because they already know that it's just more of the game that is already not popular. And again, most developers will just not make an expansion. So this is literally just something that is expanding positive, good experiences. And it's so ridiculous to put like this block in front of people's minds that just frames it as a no-go for whatever reason. It's so stupid.
So, I mean, I hate to be a doomer about it, but in most cases, they don't really like to make the right choices in those kind of things. And a lot of it is money motivated. And let's be real, if you get Game of the Year, it does earn you some money. I can't tell you guys how many times I had friends that reached out to me because they kept seeing Baldur's Gate 3 getting mentioned, whether they were winning another award, whether players were talking about an award or something like that. And
okay, Baldur's Gate 3 probably got more PR and advertisements because of this goddamn bear scene, this bear sex scene, than with any award that this game ever won, period. And I would just leave it at that, because I think most people know that this is absolutely true, right? Like, the only award that I've seen that got explicitly mentioned in terms of Baldur's Gate 3 was the Game Awards, the award show that we are talking about. All the other awards were usually just summarized in, this game won so and so many awards this year. That's it. Like, he might be in a special bubble where people actually, for whatever reason, give a frick about random, mostly meaningless awards. But I don't think that's the reality for most people.
Never played a turn-based game before, finally gave the game a shot because they just kept hearing about it. So at one point in time, it all has to be true, and I got to give the game a shot, and that's how it works for some of these games. That's not saying that these awards make successful games, like I said earlier, but it does really give them an extra boost that keeps them in the spotlight, gives them a little bit of extra money, and those games deserve it when they actually deserve it. So I don't know. I don't really know what like the solution to something like this is either, because like I don't really see the Game Awards somehow getting closer to the perspective of the players. I mean, this whole like 90 versus 10% thing is just like crazy to me. Why do you even have us vote if that's the case? Because 9 times out of 10, our vote doesn't matter. Right? Well, I guess
wrong. 100 times out of 100, the votes don't matter. Because this is not like we are just able to vote for one category. This is like we're able to vote for every category, and it doesn't matter.
This is probably not really exactly how the math works, but I would guess that the vast majority of times our votes don't even really count. I would almost bet that they probably don't even check it to begin with. Why would you? And they're not even necessary at that point. And yeah, I don't know. Anyway, tell me what you guys think. One of the other things I'll bring this up to before I finish. looking at some of the awards and some of the different nominations, things don't really make a lot of sense. Because looking at like ongoing games as an example, how is Diablo 4 voted for best ongoing game, but we're not seeing Warframe as an example? Or
again, I think, yeah, absolutely. I think Diablo 4 has nothing. It just has no reason to be there. Path of Exile, Warframe. Even there are so many indie games that get regular updates. But again, I think the only game that should win this category is No Man's Sky. I will not debate anyone on this. It is simply true. If the industry learns one thing, and if these award shows have any impact, then I do want No Man's Sky to win, to signal the industry that treating your players right and making up your own shit mistakes can be worth it. That's what, in my opinion, a No Man's Sky win for the ongoing game award should signal the industry. That's it. If Helldivers wins, I'm going again. I don't think the awards mean anything anyway. But if Helldivers wins over No Man's Sky, a game that locked out hundreds, if not thousands of players, I'm sorry. That's like literally the complete opposite of what No Man's Sky is doing for the past how many years? Half a decade? With its 3 expansions?
Path of Exile, when those games are not only more popular, but more successful and also more liked by their communities. I mean, Path of Exile is an example. They've been developing and
but again, Diablo 4 is only in there because it drives more people to watch the show. Because it is a big and popular name, big popular game. Viewer numbers equals money.
Continuing to support the base game while they're making a new game, and then plan to still support both equally in the future.
I mean, we have to be honest, Path of Exile and even Warframe are still kinda niche, while Diablo is simply, it is an established name. Right, and as he said before as well, that many of these outlets probably just voted for the thing that they know, because otherwise they have nothing to do with gaming at all.
How are you not showing some love, appreciation, and shining a spotlight on that, especially for the kind of value that it brings to the players, the kind of appreciation it shows to the players? I saw Asmongold recently brought up another Crab's Treasure for games of impact because of how well it does, environmentalism and things like that. Metaphor would be another really good example of a game that could make it into games of impact. It's one of the very few games in the last few years that I've seen be able to cover a topic like diversity in the right way. Anyway.
Okay, sounds
Hope
interesting.
you guys enjoyed the video. If you guys did, share the video with your friends, like the video, subscribe to the channel, comment down below. Let me know what you guys think about the Game Award nominations. Did your favorite game make it up there? What game should have been up there? What game shouldn't have been up there? If you say Balatro, you're banned.
Balatro. But yeah, I don't have to repeat what he has just said. Do the same thing on my video. Tell me what you think about my assessment of his video. I'm curious if you have some good counterpoints. Let's stay civil. I want to point out very clearly, despite that I trashed quite a lot onto Balatro right here, I don't have anything against this game. I like having many good indie games out there for every niche possible, right? And to be fair, the card deck building community had a lot of bangers, as far as I can tell, in the past few years, right? So I really like it. I just think it has nothing to do in these nominations by every metric possible, which I think I have pointed out enough at this point. And yeah, I do believe I have said everything there's to say. Do the things that he told you to do, but on this video, please. And yeah, tell me what you think. Keep it civil. And we might see us in another video. See ya.